Welcome to day 2 of Open Studio. I'm just gathering the last few supplies from out of Open Studio. And here you all are. You're all joining me today at Hello Art Studios here in Ottawa. You've set up your own Hello Art Studios at your own living room or your dining room table, your basement, wherever you have it. It's your space for the next hour. So for those of you who are joining me for the first time and those are returning, welcome. My objective with doing this open studio during this COVID pandemic is to get people into their creative spaces, to get you out of your thinking minds, because we're doing far too much of that these days, and into your creative spaces. So together we'll have ideas flowing, and it doesn't matter what you're working on. I know my friend Tracy, who's online, she's working on some greeting cards, and I guess Tracy's at home during this time as well, and she's creating a new series of greeting cards that she was inspired to do during this time. So welcome, Tracy, and welcome anyone who is joining us for this hour of creative fun. Yesterday I tried a new platform that didn't really work very well for me. And because it didn't work very well for me, I'm just going old school today, picking up my iPhone and just bringing it to you live from the studio. So I'm going to turn the camera on myself so I can say hi. Hi, everybody. So here we are at the studio. I'll turn around so that you can see the great space that I have here. It's awfully quiet these days, but that's okay because I have you all joining me. So I started a painting yesterday, but of course I encourage you all to just do your own thing and pull out your art supplies, pull out whatever it is that make you happy. Maybe you're knitting, maybe you're crocheting, maybe you're, like Tracy, making cards. It doesn't matter what you're doing. This hour is for you to get out of that thinking headspace that we've all found ourselves in lately. By being either stuck at home or everybody's had to adapt and change their routines, which it's normal. There are so many great philosophers out there who will tell you that those who don't adapt are the ones who don't thrive. So in this time of change and wild changes as they are, hi Mel, wild changes so they are, everybody needs to adapt. And for me, adapting means, it means that we have to pull out our art supplies, whatever they may be, your craft supplies. I know my sister-in-law Mel's watching today, and she is a long time ago scrapbooker. So Mel, I hope you're pulling out those scrapbook materials today. It doesn't matter what your discipline is. It doesn't matter how you find creative outlets for yourself. The key and the goal, I think, for me anyway, is to challenge all of you to take at least an hour every day, and if you can't carve out noon to 1, watch it on replay, but join me in this creative studio so that we can get out of our heads, out of our minds, and just play. So this is not an art lesson. I paint, therefore I'm going to be painting in front of you, and often I'll talk about my painting. I welcome questions of any kind. So if you have questions about what I'm actually doing, I'm happy to answer them. It's unfortunate that Facebook doesn't have an interactive other than the chat. So if you have questions, fire them off and I may get back to them right away. But if you're watching this on replay, or you think of something later on that you want to ask me, or there's a topic you want to discuss for tomorrow's chat or whenever, feel free to fire them off to me and I'll take all that into consideration, hopefully answer your questions later. So I'm going to turn the camera back onto my painting. Oh, that didn't work very well. I'm going to turn the camera back onto my painting. There we go. And hopefully I'll get this adjusted so that you can see what I'm doing. But at the same time, I encourage you, because of proprietary reasons, wow, that's making everybody probably pretty sick right now. For proprietary reasons, we can't, or I can't play music. But normally I do when I'm painting. I'm always listening to music. There, that looks a little better. I'm always listening to music, so I encourage you to put on your headphones or just crank up your tunes, listen to whatever you enjoy listening to. And I'm probably not going to say anything that profound anyway. It's just an outlet for everybody to get together and to raise our creative vibe, our creative energy together. So yesterday I started a mixed media piece, and I was showing everyone that the way I work is very loose and very free, I guess. I started with a background of just old newspaper, and you know what, actually I'm going to get in here and show you that. I started with a background of old newspapers, and I mean really old newspapers, and then some sewing pattern. And you gotta love that shag wig advertisement. This paper was from Expo, was it 67? I can't remember. Anyway, it was a really old newspaper that came from my husband's aunt's apartment when she passed, and I got all kinds of cool papers and clippings and things that she had saved. And so anyway, the first step for me was I just collaged the entire thing full of paper, all kinds of paper, and then just let that dry. So once it was dry, then yesterday, if anyone watched the replay yesterday, what I did was I just came in with some more collage, like this piece of paper and this piece of paper. And then I started to add a few other pieces of paper, just add a bit more layer and dimension to it. And then I took just an ordinary pair of scissors with a pointy tip, and I started scratching and making some marks through the painting. And the marks for me, when I'm doing sort of random scratches and marks and everything else, they're subtle, but they're my guideline for a path to follow. So let's just step back for a second and I can explain what that means. So when this whole thing was one unified field of collage paper that was all about the same color, I had no idea that I was going to get these random shapes in here, like this sort of oval type thing, and then these weird shapes on the bottom, and then this little leg which comes out to support it on the right. I had no idea where those shapes would come from, how those abstract marks would develop. So what I did was I just took these scissors and I just started carving into the paper and right into the wood, because I'm painting on a wood panel. And I carved really deep gouge lines. As you can see, I've got scratches and gouge lines everywhere. And then what I did with those is just part of my process. Then I stand back with paint and I started to paint out some of the areas. So for any of you who've taken any workshops with me, you hear me say this all the time, is that I'm trying to, at first in my painting, create some direction and to create some world. The reason I say a world is because that's how my paintings have been described, that they're otherworldly and that they are an abstract sort of representation of something. So it occurred to me yesterday, after I had put some paint on here, some white paint, that my gouge lines needed to be more pronounced. So I used like a blue paint and a bit of a green paint, and I just put it on all over the place into those gouge lines, and then I used my handy dandy baby wipes and I wiped back all the surface paint so that the only paint that stayed was the stuff that was actually in the gouge lines. And then, because this upper part here was really solidly painted, I wasn't really that enamored by it because I had all this great paper underneath and nothing to actually show. What I did was I sprayed it with water and then I just let it run down. So when I was leaving yesterday, I took a glance back at this painting, and from afar, I'm going to go back and I'm going to show you that. Let's take a little walk to the back of the studio. Pretend we're coming in. So when I stood back and I looked at it, I don't know if you could see that, but it occurred to me that that was the world, that was the earth. And what I found really extremely interesting about that is I didn't plan that, but it very clearly tells me that that's the earth. And if I start to read into my painting, I wonder, you know, why am I painting the earth? What's going on? What is going on in the earth right now? And the story behind the artwork is starting to take shape. So what I mean by that is oftentimes when we paint from a place of planned and from, I don't know, not obligation, I can't really say that, but if we paint the same thing or you draw the same thing or you make the same thing time and time and time again, then the surprise, the element of surprise, I guess, isn't really there for us. So what we have to do is, if we want to have that element of surprise back into our art form, whatever that may be, then I think we need to learn from the pieces as they're going. So I'm going to turn this back again onto, back onto my little tripod here, and fire away any questions. Let me know what you want to talk about. I'll try my best to answer. I used to be getting a live feed. Now I don't seem to be getting it anymore, but these are all technical problems. Not that big a deal. There we go. Oh, for a proper tripod. All right. How many times have you found yourself saying that, had I known that this was going to happen, meaning this world pandemic was going to happen, I would have done X, Y, and Z very differently? That's exactly how I find myself answering most of my questions. Like, why don't I have a proper tripod? Well, number one is because I hadn't really planned that the world was going to be self-isolating and I'd be broadcasting live from my quiet little studio on my iPhone. So yeah, had I known, I would have invested in a proper tripod and you all would have had a better visual experience. But for now, we're just going to talk. You're going to play. Let me know in the comments, whether it's now or later, what it is you're working on. I want to see how you're using your creative time to, I was going to say to pass the time, but that's the wrong thing to say, because I never find my creative time as just passing the time. I'm always learning from my experiences, and I'm always learning from my paintings, as we were talking about before. And I'm always playing into the idea that that I guess that this is my work. This, you know, everything that I do, whether I'm playing or whether I'm creating for purpose, like if I'm making product for any one of my commercial endeavors, or if I'm painting for a gallery show, or if I'm just making stuff for my own fun's sake, I think it's really important, and it's also really relevant to learn from each and every piece you do. So as I had started to work on this piece and I started to see a world developing here, two things that I observed was that, one, I don't really like all the blue and the green. So a little bit of blue and green is good for me, but for some reason it just didn't feel warm enough. So I decided that the first thing I was going to do when I went at it today is I was going to try to bring in a bit more of the colors that that I'm currently working with and that excite me. So it's not that that this is always the palette I go to. This is just my current palette. So I've been really enjoying, and I'll show you on here, I've been really enjoying working with This is the latest series I've been working on. So I've been enjoying, obviously, animals have been my latest subject matter for anybody who follows me on social media. I've been painting in series of using animals. But at the same time, what's changing for me and what's ever adapting and following is that my color palette changes almost with every, I don't know, I'm not going to put a timeline on it, but maybe every year or every, whatever it is, every once in a while I get attracted to new colors and new palettes. So if you look at older work, there was a lot of pink, a lot of vibrant colors, a lot of colors all brought together. And now you can see I'm in a much more neutral palette. Of course, really observing, as I always do, my love for vintage papers and vintage feel of things. I love the relationship between man and nature in terms of decay, so that's why I like scratches and things like that, because I actually love to see the it's just that decay, I suppose, is what I like to see in a painting. That's where I accidentally burnt the paper the other day, which was actually really cool. Not that burning paper was really cool, but the idea that I hadn't planned on those scorch marks happening on the outside of that infinity symbol, or 8, depending on whichever way you look at it. But the scorch marks came sort of accidentally, and I thought that was just fantastic. There's my little elk guy with his tongue sticking out. Anyway, that picture was taken on our trip this summer to, or last fall, sorry, to Jasper, Alberta. So I'm going to turn the camera back on the painting. I'm going to get working and keep talking, and I'm hoping, like I said, that you're all going to start to share in the comments pictures of what it is you've been working on. Yesterday, there was a whole bunch of great postings about different things people were working on, whether it was Tracy, who was working on cards, and Allison, who had done her incredible pencil drawings, and she started a picture of some eggs, which sounds really boring, but check it out in the comments. It's incredible. Everything's incredible that I saw there. It's not coming to mind right now because I dropped something and I can't find it, and of course that's very distracting. But I shall move on and I shall start painting. I'm going to find something else to put behind my phone to keep as a little prop so that we can see better. That's good. There we are. Okay, so once we start sharing this and getting more followers and everything else, then maybe we'll stumble on the right platform for sharing these videos. And maybe it'll be with Zoom or something else that'll be a bit more conferencing so that I can hear you speaking. And if I can hear you speak, then I can certainly tailor the talk to what it is you want to talk about. But for now, unfortunately, we just have to go with hearing me yammer on and on. Unless, like I said, you've gone ahead and turned on your music, which I encourage you to do. I am going to continue to work on this painting, which to me, like I said, looks like the Earth. And as we know, the Earth right now is crying out for some help. I've seen all kinds of blogs and posts about people saying that the Earth needs a change, and the Earth needs our energy, and the Earth needs our love, and the Earth needs our help. And the reality is, I don't think anybody knows really what the Earth knows or needs. But all we can do during this time, like I said, is do our best to inject all the positive energy we can into it, all the creativity, all the love, all the time that we're spending with family and with loved ones. And it's really important. I'm going to move my water. I think it's really important that everybody honors this time the way that they feel they need to. So, of course, everybody's spreading the word that staying at home is the key. So, yeah, I guess we're all just doing our part right now to stay low key to prevent the spread. But that's nothing new. Whoops. So that was a mistake. I put my glue on the wrong side, but since we're talking about adapting, I'm going to use that and adapt. So, now the reason I told you earlier that I was going to add some warmer papers is because when I added the blue and the green yesterday, it was a little, I don't know, a little cool for me. So now I'm just warming up this painting a little bit. And I love my collage elements because it adds an instant change. So when I put that warmth there now, I'm feeling like that's just warmed things up. And then I have this fantastic ledger paper that is just the most gorgeous shade of yellow with the burnt edges. And I actually bought that at an auction. So it's an authentic old ledger that just has the right colorings in it for everything I like to do. So I'm just going to play with positioning here. Ooh, right there looks great. So as you can see, what I'm doing is I'm creating a bit of a situation for myself where there's a disconnection now between my bottom layers, which felt very much connected because of the colors. I had used the blues and the greens, but now that I'm introducing this new color palette, I have to actually swing the whole painting in a bit of a different direction. That's not a bad thing. It's actually a great thing for me because I'm going to be way more excited by the new color palette than the one that I had previously created for myself, which was, like I mentioned before, a bit too cool. So it's a great piece of paper, and I keep using it over and over and over again because there is an absolute magical quality about the tone of how the paper has yellowed over time. So that's good. So, loving that. There. One more, I think, piece of this paper for now, and then I'm going to centric. Two. Sorry, bouncing ideas off myself right now. Where does that feel good? That feels pretty good up here. So I'm going to pull out my white paper, or my white paint again, and only because what I want to do is I want to neutralize some of that green that I had brought in earlier. And not that, like I said, I have nothing against green. I just want to warm up the painting a little bit, and so by bringing in some neutral colors, I need to neutralize a little bit of that green and a little bit of that blue, and I'll do that by bringing in some white first and then warming up some of the areas. So how do you paint? How do you create? How do you follow your muse? Talk to me. Tell me anything in the comments. Tell me what it is you you'd like to know about anything creative. Tell me what you want to know about following your own muse. Everybody always tells me that I'll just make sure I'm still live here. Apparently so. Everybody always tells me that I'm a generous teacher with my not with my ideas, but with my instruction, meaning that I don't hold anything back. And I don't. And that's not because I'm terribly generous. It's because I actually don't believe that any of us create the same way. So if I reveal all my secrets to everybody who takes my workshops, I actually don't feel like all I'm going to do is produce all these people who know how to paint like me at the end of the day. All I believe I'm doing is opening up new pathways to receiving creative ideas and information outside of ourselves that is always available to us. We just don't know how to ask for it. So I did take mixed media lessons once upon a time, and I continue to take different classes in different mediums because I believe it's really important to learn new things. But I also feel that it's opening me up to receive new information. And where that information comes from is also a bit intriguing because some people have likened it to channeling creative ideas. Some people, if you've read or watched Elizabeth Gilbert's TED Talk on catching creative ideas, I just recently read a book from the producer David Lynch, who talks about meditation as a way to catching ideas. And that's what I want you to share with me is how you catch ideas, how you know you can get into that zone where you're receptive to better ideas and to good ideas and to creative ideas. And it doesn't have to be painting. Like I said, I mean, just because I paint, there are so many of you who will be watching this video who may either learn from this process or you may develop your own keen interest again in developing your own art form, whatever that may be. There we go. So I don't know if anybody can see that. Maybe I have to get up closer to show you. But when I was talking about warming up the green, in order to warm up the green first, I'm neutralizing it by adding some white. And that white is just taking away from that obvious green and the blue that was really not interesting to me. So now I'm just going to add a bit of this weird yellow color. And for no reason other than, there we go, that I just want to warm this up a little bit. So my work ends up being a bit of a dance between adding paint, removing paint, back and forth, adding marks, taking them away. I talked a little bit about this yesterday. I really believe that every mark we add to our paintings, every color, every layer, is not a mistake, because even in the removal of it, you've left something interesting behind that wasn't there before. So I'll repeat that again because I think it's worth repeating. Because often when I'm teaching, I hear that all the time. People go, oh, I shouldn't have added that. That was a mistake. How do I take that out? In fact, Maria from, I'm not sure where she lives in BC, but Maria from BC was asking me the other day about drips. So I did a little video on how to do drips, and then she sent me a picture of this painting she had made, and she added her drips, and they looked fantastic, but they were just slightly out of place. So she sent me a question saying, should I remove the drips? And that's the question that I get from people all the time, is because you've gone and done something and you're like, oh, probably shouldn't have done that. But the reality is, in the removal of it, or in the process of having added that, you've almost opened up a new channel for discovery for something else to happen, or in the removal of it, you've left behind something interesting that wasn't there before. So, like with this yellow, I just put this yellow on to warm things up, and it feels too heavy to me, sure, but look at in the removal, I'm just now scratching through it a little bit. I'm actually finding some interesting marks, and then here, like where the paper peeled off and revealed something else, that to me is super interesting. I apologize if you can't really hear me all that well. I forgot the microphone at home. Like I said, every day I'll learn. Every day will do a little bit better. Anyway, so now with my baby wipes, I'm going to go in and I'm just going to remove a little bit. Maybe not all of it, but in the removing of it, I end up leaving something behind that wasn't there before. So in this case, like I'm leaving behind a stain of yellow that previously had been, like I mentioned, too cool. So in leaving behind a little bit of yellow, I'm leaving behind something that is now warmer than before. So now, not everybody works in abstract, and not everybody works in imagery, and not everybody works in whatever it is that I might be doing right now. But the point I want to illustrate, I suppose, with this open studio is that we can learn from each other, which is why I talked about it being important that you post things in the comments, because other people might learn from that. So even if you take pictures of your work at various stages, or even post maybe something that you learned from playing that you didn't know before. So when I'm playing and I'm making marks, I always discover new things. And right now, I'm going to turn this around or get it close so that you can see it. I want to show you something that I just discovered. So I'm discovering that this color combination of this green in the background and the white and then the yellow on top, it's actually not all that bad to me. I actually don't mind that combination at all. And blue is not a color that I tend to use a lot in my work, but I think in this piece, it's starting to feel a bit more settled, I guess, for me. When I'm painting, I like to get excited by the color combinations, and when you do the same old, it's hard to get excited about something because it is the same old, right? So in this case, I'll show you some little detailed areas. Like there's a navy blue that I'm really not that fond of, so I'll be killing that in a little while. Also this little blue area, I might switch it to black, blue again down there. And then this little world thing hasn't actually given me much to work from yet, so I'm gonna maybe tackle that soon because it does feel like an area that could use a bit of work. So let's get our little camera set back up. There we go. Okay, so like I said, loving that. Not loving everything, but that's okay. Yeah, let's switch that blue to black and see what happens. So that's going to be something that is always an experiment for me. When I take a color that's already there and it feels wrong, and I'm just now going to make a glaze out of something else. So I've added a bit of black and I'm using mostly water. And I'm going to take those areas that previously had blue or green, and I'm going to stain them. So right now this is a pretty drastic black, but I'm going to let that sit for a second, and using a bit more water. some more black paint, I'm going to change out some of this blue and green. And that to me should give me a better appreciation for this painting, because like I said previously, the blue and the green, not that there's anything wrong with blue and green, just doesn't work for me. So that was green, definitely going to get rid of that. I don't have to kill all the blue and all the green, but I do know that for me, I'm going to need to do a significant amount in order for it to feel better to me. So, so watch what I'm doing here, because this is always shocking to people. This is called a patina. And a patina is when you put on any type of paint or color with the intention of it sitting in the grooves, and then you end up removing most of it. So I am actually just doing a very heavy patina here of black. This is a thinned down chalk paint. So it's a black chalk paint with a lot of water in it. And the intention behind this application and this patina is to tone down that blue and that green. But of course, remembering that the intention of a patina is to remove the paint and for the stain of the paint to be absorbed in either any absorbent surface, like this paper that I have here is super absorbent, or in any of the scratches and the gouges that I've made. So the black will sit in all there. And right now it's looking quite messy, but it actually feels better to me because of that toning down of that blue and that green color. So why did I use blue and green in the first place? I don't know, first thing I picked up. But like I said before, I actually don't believe that the addition of anything is ever bad, because the removal of it just adds one more layer, right? So in some areas now, I'll have a little bit of blue and green, but in other areas, I'll just have a little hint of that blue and green coming through, and maybe that's all I ever really was going for. All right, so that's looking much better in my mind. Now I think I need to add just a bit more of this black patina to bring my eye around. And then this area over here that I was loving, I'm just gonna add a bit of that black back into here. Try and get that area a bit happier. Okay, I need a bit more black, I think. So I'm not going in with a heavy layer of black at this time. This is just a wash, the patina we talked about. And now I'm going to show you one of my favorite tricks. So right now, like I said, it looks kind of wild, looks kind of dark, looks kind of messy. People are probably asking, why in the world would you do that to your painting? Okay, here goes. So pulling out those handy dandy baby wipes now, while the paint, there we go, while the paint is still wet, it's not wet to the touch, but it hasn't cured yet. So while it hasn't cured, and a cure on a chalk paint or an acrylic paint or something usually takes like a good 24 hours or so. But what we're going to do is I'm going to go in with the baby wipes, and I'm just going to start to remove and wash away some of that patina that I had put in there. Now what it's going to do for me is it's going to sink into the low spots and into those gouges and areas where I've created the scratching, and it's just going to add, I don't know, maybe I have to bring the camera over so you can see it, but it's adding like a depth to those scratches that didn't exist before. So I find that fantastically interesting. I'm just going to paint this over again because it feels to me like it should be a bit darker. There we go. And This piece of paper that we added to the bottom didn't feel integrated at all. Now it's time to integrate that piece. So I'm going to spray a little water because it's really hot in here and it's drying so quickly that I could end up going through hundreds of baby wipes just to remove things. So I'm just going to add a little bit of moisture back into it. Water is extremely corrosive to a painting. For anyone who's taken my classes before, anyone who's taken any type of acrylic class, you'll know that water really eats through any kind of paint or any type of dye or ink or anything like that that is water based. So if it hasn't had time to really dry, it's only dry to the touch, then you'll find that it's going to be extremely corrosive, and water will eat through those surfaces really fast. So it's actually good for anybody wanting to do a patina where you're just wanting to leave the paint in the recesses, in the lower levels. Now, a question I get all the time is people who do oil painting or people who do encaustic will say, oh, I didn't know you can do a patina on an acrylic base or on a water-based painting. And the answer is yes, you can, as long as you're using the same material. So what that means is when you're in encaustic and we're using oil-based paints, then you make an oil-based patina using oil paints. When you're doing it with a water-based paint, such as acrylics or chalk paint or anything like that, then what you're actually going to be doing is you're going to be using a water-based paint patina. And instead of adding oil to a water-based paint patina to thin it, you're going to use water. So a patina is just that. It's just a paint or glaze that you make up that is meant for the purpose to stay in the grooves and stain the surface depending on how much you leave on there. So I'm not sure how much you're seeing the difference, but to me, let's spray a little bit of water again. To me, this painting has taken on like a much richer, deeper feel by the simple addition of black instead of that blue. So where I put the black really heavy down here, I'm just going to remove some with the baby wipe. And you're going to see that that's completely given it a different depth of color that the blue wasn't really giving it. So some of the blue is still quite visible, which is not bad. It's actually quite important to the overall painting, but the depth is now coming through in the black. So another area that I'm going to change the coloring is in the drips here. So I'll repeat the video I made the other day about drips and how you do drips. So dripping isn't so much about having extra water so that your painting so that your paint will be diluted. So I just did this one here. I added a little bit of black paint, and now you can see if I just add water to it, I can get a drip, but the drip is very watery. It's very, it's just like stained water. So for a very subtle drip, that's all you're going to want to do is stain the water a little bit. And I know my friend Amelia, hi Amelia, I know Amelia, she does like water drips through hers, and then when she removes the water afterwards by blotting it or something like that, she'll notice that the water is actually so corrosive that it goes right through into the bottom layer. In this case, because it's on white, it's really interesting because that drip just looks like this really faint little drip, which is adding to it. But you can see these old blue drips over here are quite prominent, and they're blue. So if I want this area to look like it's black, and it was dripping black, what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint this area black first and then let it dry. And the reason you want to let it dry is because if I go ahead and spray it with water, right now, I'm going to end up with this, right? I'm going to end up with these thin, watery drips. So now if I want to add like pure black drips here, I'll let that dry. But because I want to illustrate this right now, I'm not going to let it dry. I'm just going to show you what I do. I want to make sure that the paint, I'm going to add new full strength paint, but I'm going to dilute the paint with some water directly on my palette or in a little cup until it gets to the point where it's running off my brush. So when I turn my brush upside down, I should see black water, black paint, coming off the end of my brush. So I'm only seeing a drip. So I'm going to dilute a little more. And then now I think I have this really watery paint, but I have to make sure that it's still paint consistency. So now when I add my brush, you can see it's following the path of least resistance, and it's following some of my scratches, but the full-on drips are full strength. They're full strength black and quite prominent and quite strong. So do I want to dilute these a little bit? Why not? Let me try it. So now what I'll do is, now that I have my paint on here and it's full strength, now I can actually just add a spray of water right at the source of where I applied it. And because the paint in the background was full strength and presumably dry, it's actually going to stay there and it's not going to look all watery and washed out. So you see the difference between these drips and this drip? That's just because this one, like I said, we added it with diluted paint rather than going into just spraying the water directly on there. So now let's deal with this thing up here. So let me check the time. How are we doing? We only have 10 more minutes together today in our creative time. Okay, I desperately want to attack this, but I don't want tomorrow you guys to come back to this painting and say it's completely changed. My creativity easily gets engaged when I start doing this, and 1 hour turns into 2 hours, turns into 3 hours. So whatever it is you're working on, if you find that, you know, you're just getting going, I encourage you, please continue. Yesterday when I left, I was like so tempted to start doing more behind the scenes, and then you wouldn't see the transformation of the painting happen. So, but one thing that did happen was when I started to see this as a world, my subject matter, again, not getting into too much of this being about the Christina Lovisa show and what I paint, because that's not what this is intended to be. This is more recognizing a lot about your own process and recognizing a lot about your own creativity and your subject matter and just why. So always be questioning why you're doing anything you're doing when you're painting, because one thing I've discovered about myself is that my subject matter is generally a reflection of where I am and who I am at that time. So it makes perfect sense to me when I look back over the years, my subject matter of my paintings and why it consumed me and why I made series that were all about that one topic. And now it's really interesting to me that I'm painting these big animals, because I'm not painting lions and tigers and ferocious animals. I'm painting gentle giants, which is really kind of interesting, because I've always felt that you should never mistake like as in the deer, right? You should never mistake someone who's quiet or something who's quiet and gentle for something that is meek and or weak. And I don't know, I guess that's where I'm at these days. And so when my husband and I traveled to out west, and I got all these pictures of all these massive elk and buffalo and everything else. I just found it really interesting that everywhere we went, there were signs posted in bathrooms and everything, like, be careful, because if you approach a male elk, like, basically your life's over. They're going to trample you, and that's the end of it all. And it just, when I actually saw them, and we saw them up close and personal in the wild, and they were interacting with their herds, and again, I'm not sure if that's the right word, but let's just say that they have a herd. When they were interacting with their herd, like, they had great responsibility, these male elk, to protect and to keep the herd together, and to keep them safe, and to keep them moving, and to keep them, from out of harm's way of the tourists and everything else. They didn't appear to me these horrible, mean creatures that were going to trample you at any given time. So looking at these gentle giants, I recognized their power, but I also recognized just how beautiful and how gentle they were. So I think that's what my whole elk obsession is these days, is because I'm seeing myself in the elk. So when I put this here, I cut this out yesterday because I'm like, ooh, wouldn't it be cool if there was an elk in this painting? Because everything right now, right, to me is elk, because I'm elk obsessed. So I cut him out from a picture that I took, and I actually think he looks so good there. And I'm tempted to glue him in and then to deal with the balance of the painting later. You know what? The heck with it. Let's just do it. I always tell people to be careful when you add your images, if you're in a mixed media course or if you're on your own, because all too often we get really tempted to put our images in too early. And so, for instance, had I put this elk in here yesterday before any of the paint and before I warmed up the color and everything else, I might have been stuck with a situation where, where I've considered this area too precious, and then I would have been avoiding that. And the problem with that is that had I put him here and then I was afraid of staining this black, adding yellow, adding more scratches, changing the color of this, adding that area would have been less worked than the rest, and I would have been working around this area, which now looked vastly different from everything else. So I'm just going to add the elk now, because we're on a bit of this journey together, and you're watching this painting evolve. And to be perfectly honest, I don't know if I can leave it alone till tomorrow, and then you come back to it and you're like, what has she done? I thought she said she was making this painting in front of our eyes. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to add my glue to the back of this elk. And so any of you who've taken my course, haven't taken my course, whatever, new to collaging, remember the simple rule. It's like a mantra of mine. I'm going to have it tattooed on my arm. Glue likes to stick to glue. So what that means is I just put glue on the back of the paper that I'm gluing, and then where I'm planning on putting this beast, I'm also going to put a layer of glue. So normally I use wallpaper paste with a little bit of white glue in it, but oh great, I've gone and glued my elk to the paper. But because of the situation we're in right now, you know what? I just glued my elk to the paper. Oh, this is terrible news. Okay, you know what? This happens, and it shouldn't have happened. So I guess it's not time for me to add that elk quite yet. So even I'm going to have to be patient. I'm going to remove my glue, and then tomorrow, I promise not to be tempted and add a new elk today, I'm going to remove my glue and I'm going to continue to paint up here. So yeah, we only have a few minutes left, and like I said, I really wish I was able to interact with you right now, but I hope you all have had time to find a creative outlet for yourselves, to dive into something, and to use this time of, is it self-reflection? I don't know. What are we calling this time now? This quarantine time is definitely worth naming, because it's affecting everyone in different ways, but at the same time, the same way. You can't turn on the news these days without reading about, the the trials and tribulations of everyone who has something going on right now. And it affects everyone in very different ways, but at the same time, like I said, we're all in this together and we're all affected in the same way. Oh, I have a good idea. So I have this great little paper. Where should that go? See, this is what happens when you get, oh, there you go. This is what happens when you get going with creativity. You just don't want to stop. And there we go. Oh my gosh, doesn't that piece of tissue look phenomenal there? So I'm going to use my baby wipe to remove any glue from the top. In my process, the reason I have to remove the glue is because I'm going to have to deglaze all this in the event that I want to go and add encaustic wax to the top. So, wow, that really pops there. That's pretty cool. Okay, so playing with other papers. See, now we have this. So do we go ahead and add a strip of that down there? Did I hear a yes? Go for it? I don't know. Anyway, could be the wrong move. Oh, it's definitely the right move. See, if I had glued that elk there in the first place and that was the right spot for it, then I couldn't have done it because, or I would have moved that paper to the right or to the left so that it wouldn't have interfered with the elk. But now what's going to happen is the elk has a perfect little place to walk tomorrow when I actually put him in. So this fantastic little pop of orange now resides on the bottom, which we don't have that anywhere else. We have an echo of this interesting little blue color. And this is a paper that I had previously made, and I photocopy backgrounds and paintings all the time so that I can rip them apart and use them as collage elements. But hey, that's cool, right? Okay, so loving. Definitely see an opportunity for some black and white at the top. Let me grab a new brush. And I promise not to do too much more before packing it in, but this is what happens to me. I get really excited. So I'm going to go in with some black because I'm finding that there's a little imbalance happening at the top and with these dark areas, and it feels very white up here. So I'm going to want you to look up here. So I'm going to do that by adding a little value contrast. And I'm following, you can't see it until I bring it up close, but I'm actually following this little collage paper line that I have at the time, which is helping me to create my, sort of my direction of where I'm putting the black. There. So it's, yeah, definitely missing up here. So let's add even a little smidge to keep it relevant. Love how that one just dripped a little bit. There we go. So just a little bit of black at the top is keeping this whole side relevant. I'm also going to go back in here because I have a little bit of an area that looks like it could be enough to say, hey, look over here. I have another little bit on here. That maybe what I'm going to do is I'll just remove some of it using my baby wipe. But again, that little bit of a stain is just enough to have you look over on that side. And I think that that might have to be it for today, kids. So to wrap all this up, join me every day, will you? Join me in your creative efforts to not just pass this time, but to stimulate and elevate your creativity in whatever it is you're passionate about, whatever it is that makes you play and you feel like you could do it all day, And honestly, I do feel like I could do this all day, but because I promised you that I would leave this painting alone and engage with you daily on it, I'm going to leave it alone. I am definitely, I'm going to turn this around and we'll get a closer view. There we go. So, ew, you see that blue area? Yuck. Anyway, we'll deal with that one tomorrow. But for now, it's definitely, to me, making me shudder a little bit. But anyway, hopefully I remember tomorrow that was an eyesore for sure. And yeah, so I thought I heard somebody come into the studio, but maybe not. I was going to give you a little tour, a little say hello to another artist. But for today, bye everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and share this with anyone that you think can benefit from taking an hour out of their day to get creative. All right, see you tomorrow.